Okay, it's going to be a review of Snoop Doggy Dogg's debut album. It's called Doggystyle. This month actually marks the 30th anniversary of the album's release. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I wanted to talk about it. You know, if there's one album when I look back on that really set the world on fire and that is timeless, you know, this will be it. You know, and what really got me thinking about doing this video is, I think Dead End Hip Hop, they were debating what was the greatest release date in hip hop history, and you know, it's probably the greatest month in hip hop. November '93, I would have to say it is. And I'll tell you, if Doggystyle was released on November 9th, you know, that easily would have been the best release date in hip hop history. You had Tribe Called Quest releasing their third album, Midnight Marauders, arguably their best album on that date. And you also had Wu-Tang, you know, releasing the 36 Chambers, the first Wu-Tang album, which, you know, also set the world on fire. It's an interesting debate. You know, I mean, you could definitely argue that Wu-Tang is the best album of '93. It totally depends on your taste. But, you know, November of '93, it was an incredible month. Snoop's album was released 2 weeks later. You always forget about that. It was November 23rd, 1993. But the whole month was great. You even had Queen Latifah's, you know, best album be released. And, you know, the underrated album will be Del the Funky Homo Sapiens' best album, No Need for Alarm. But he was more of an underground rapper. That totally went under the radar, you know, at least, you know, in my eyes at that time. But yeah, you know, with Doggystyle, in retrospect, you know, it's funny because I bought Chronic in April of '94, and then I actually, you know, got Doggystyle on cassette the very next month in May of '94. So both of them kind of went hand in hand for me. I love both albums. If you're going to ask me what's the better album, what's the better record, I would say the Chronic. And I think the difference is, you know, the subject matter. You know, that really, you know, that what they did on the Chronic, they gave you the images of the LA riots at the time, and I think that was the biggest difference. You know, and you know, I just feel you got more of a, you know, more of a real glimpse into who Snoop was as a person on the Chronic, especially with a song like Little Ghetto Boy. I think the biggest problem with Doggystyle compared to the Chronic, and even compared to some of the other great albums like an Illmatic, is just it's you know, it's very controversial. It's more of a party album. You know, some of the subject matter is not going to be for everybody. But the great thing about Doggystyle is when you're talking about someone being in a zone, you know, someone being untouchable, someone being, you know, just really hitting his stride and, you know, never being able to top it again, it would be Snoop, and it would be Doggystyle. And, you know, one of the great things about this album was Dre is the producer. You have DLC helping him, you know, ghostwrite and helping him write, you know, some of the better songs on the album too. So that's, to me, like, that's when Snoop is at his best. When he has creative control and when he's just going into the studio and, you know, just putting out anything he wants, you know, the quality is not going to be as good. But when you have Dre, you know, giving him structure and guidance and tweaking and just really, you know, making sure everything is up to par, you know, it's a recipe for a classic. It's a recipe for success, obviously. And, you know, it's a very controversial album as well. Mrs. C. Dolores Tucker tried to ban it. I would say this album, you know, probably more so than any other rap album. I think the only other one that would come to mind would be NWA Straight Outta Compton. I mean, people tried to ban the album. You know, they you know, there was a whole bunch of CDs that they were stomping on and, you know, breaking and throwing in the trash. But, you know, at the forefront of it, this got the most criticism, you know. And I even remember there was an MTV special with this girl actually asked Bill Clinton, the president at the time, is Snoop Doggy Dogg and rap music destroying our youth? And then Bill Clinton just says, I don't know. So, like, when you look back on it, though, it's just kind of funny to me. I just think over time you just learn and realize, you know, that Snoop is just a good-hearted guy. Like, he's not the type of guy that's going to kill people, and, you know, he's not the type of guy that's going to, you know, destroy the youth. You know, that's not him at all. But hey, you know, the subject matter, it just fit that time. You know, that's how it was at the time. You know, not everything on this record you can play, while you're driving around and, playing during Thanksgiving dinner in front of your family. It's definitely a very, sensitive, subject matter. No doubt about it. But let's get right to the review here, man. So I got to say, my favorite track on the album after all these years, it's still, What's My Name? Who Am I? I think with that song right there, it's a sample of Atomic Dog. And, at the time, when Dre and Snoop, spent a lot of time together, Dre realized, when they used to ride around together, that Snoop was really into, a lot of 70s funk, a lot of 70s soul records, throwback records. So that's why, Doggystyle has just a lot of samples from the 70s. But I think with What's My Name, man, I mean, the track, I feel like it's been underrated, since it came out. When it came out, this was played everywhere. And, I could not stop playing this track when I finally got the cassette. And I just think Snoop's delivery, the energy it gives you, it really is something to behold. I talked about the track on All Eyes on Me. It's very reminiscent of Can't See Me when you listen to the beat. But, it's a blending of, multiple samples and just... it's just one of those tracks that just hits hard, man. That's all I can really say about it. I mean, and Snoop just sounds, he's not really, telling any crazy stories here. This is What's My Name? Who am I? DMX has done his own version of a What's My Name. So he's just telling you who he is. It's pretty much straight simple. Him just kind of bragging about how good he is and where he's from. He's from Long Beach, and there's even some references to being in the Crips. So it really is. The show stealer for me. I really think it holds up over time. To me, this is easily, like, if I want to give, away from the Chronic, if you want to give a glimpse into how good Snoop was, you put on this Who Am I, What's My Name track. I think Stephen A. Smith even said that was his favorite track as well. So that's my favorite track on the album. There's really no bad tracks on here, but if I were to pick, a track that, my least favorite, it would be For All of My Niggaz and Bitches, featuring the Dogg Pound and the Lady of Rage. It's a dark track, but you really needed something to kind of switch the mood from What's My Name. So that's the track that actually follows What's My Name. But the intro, the intro is basically a playoff of the 70s movie Superfly. At the time, I had no idea whether, I always thought Snoop was talking about the rap game. Someone actually interrupts him while his girlfriend's actually giving him a massage while he's taking a bath. And then there's like a whole group of people, and this one guy's like, you want to get out the game? Man, this is the American dream. And Snoop is like, I can't take this shit no more, man. Sucker ass bitches. Everyone's trying to suck me dry. And, at the time, I thought he was talking about, getting out of the rap game. But I guess if you watch the movie, it's more so about him, getting out of the drug game. But very cinematic intro, though. I love I think it's a Curtis Mayfield sample that you've heard, time and time again throughout the years. So the G-Funk intro is very interesting. This is definitely a Dre-inspired track. Heavy bass line, lots of energy. And it's funny, Snoop doesn't even rap on it. And it's really, really interesting with this album. It sold very well. I mean, 800,000 straight out of the gate. Ultimately, I think it sold, 8 million in the USA, over 11 million worldwide. It set a record for a debut album on Billboard. But the risky thing here is like, how is he not even on his first track? You don't even hear Snoop rap until you get to track 3. So it's definitely risky. I think Earl Sweatshirt is the only rapper I could think of that did that in recent memory with his solo debut album. But it's interesting though, because when Snoop released this album, he was already a star. Like the Chronic made him a star. He had so much publicity, doing the Chronic that, it's almost like the cockiness that would normally set in on a sophomore record was actually here. But, thankfully that didn't, play a role in, deteriorating this album. You've seen, plenty of rappers go into a sophomore slump, like a Mace. Mace would be the exact example of that, where he was already a star before Harlem World because of, Puffy and Biggie and, him getting massive exposure on Bad Boy. But when he got to the, sophomore album, that was the sophomore jinx. But Yeah, with this particular album, man, having the Lady of Rage just set the tone, I thought it definitely worked. I think Rage, I've said it before, Rage was incredible here. She set a nice tone, and Snoop doesn't rap, but he basically, delivers a nice little hook where he's talking about rappers biting his style. He sees motherfuckers trying to be like him ever since he put it down with the DRE. So I just love the intro here. You definitely get a lot of familiarity with the way the Chronic opened with some of the same sound bites that you have from the Chronic. So I love that about the intro. But yeah, man, and it's funny, like I was gonna say, like it's weird because a female opens up the album with the first verse, and I was actually gonna say a female actually closes out the album with Little Malik, but I believe it's actually a male. I think it's Mr. Malik. See, I always thought it was Little Malik. But I was never clear whether this Malik at the end of Pump Pump was a female or a male. But I'm going to assume that it's a male because I've heard Malik be pronounced as Mr. Malik. So if that's the case, then that proves that theory wrong. But I always thought that was kind of funny. But Gin and Juice set the world on fire when the Gin and Juice video came out. I mean, they played this like crazy. So there's a little bit of controversy here about Dre actually doing the beat. There's multiple samples here. The hook is a different sample. The beat is a totally different sample. I think it's actually the Get Lifted sample, from the 70s, obviously. But with Gin and Juice, I'll tell you though, what Dre really did here that stood out. The mixing was incredible here. This is a beat that nobody could have done on their own. So let's get that out of the way. But when you watch the video though, after they do the opening skit with Snoop's mom yelling at him and him screaming, you hear these G-Funk synthesizers creep in. That's definitely Dre. Dre definitely tweaked this and added in his special touch, for the video, for the single. And, if you've seen the video version of this, that's the best version of it. But aside from that, though, I was under the impression, maybe Daz did the initial beat because he's actually featured on the song saying, with my mind and my money on my mind. It's funny because Tupac was actually the first one to actually, use that in his verse. And he had a whole album where he talked about, mind on my money on my mind. I think he actually had a song of that. It was more of like a party album. I think one of the tracks was "Is It Cool to Fuck?" That album. But he actually there was a lot of albums that Tupac just dropped. He's like, "Oh, fuck this! I got to change all this shit because they already came out with it first." But no, there was no beef or anything over it. But yeah, Gin and Juice was great. The video, it set the world on fire. It was just funny. It was Snoop came off like a star. He actually had his hair braided in the video, and to me, like I think this is where it got popularized. But there might have been another guy that did it before him. Iverson, usually gets credit for the cornrows. But he even said, someone did it before me. Lots of guys did it before me, and Snoop had to be one of them. Iverson's popularity was in the late '90s. This is '93. So if you want to give credit to Snoop for the braids, then go ahead. The Shiznit is great. Shiznit is a freestyle. There's multiple tracks on here that were just like microphone checks, and they ended up being freestyles. But yeah, the Shiznit is dope. This is definitely very Dre inspired. It feels like something Dre would do with the flutes and the organs. That doo 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 doo. Do do do, and he has several references. There's several times, and I don't know if this is the first album, but from my recollection, it's the first time rappers ever said, "You can't see me. I'm the D-O double G." What did he say? You can't see the D-O double G because that be me swerving in the coupe, Lexus flexes from Long Beach to Texas. And there's even another rhyme. There's some freestyle lines here that just blew my mind. If this was an actual freestyle, he said, because Snoop Dogg is Trump tight like a virgin. The surgeon is Dr. Drizzy. So Lizzie, no, I'm not European, being all I can. Want to put the motherfucking mic in my hand because Snoop is on the mic and I get wicked. Follow me. I mean, Shiznit is great, man. I love the beat. This is a freestyle that just, didn't sound like a freestyle. It just felt like, dope ass rhymes. And I think that's one of the great things that made Snoop who he is. He just has such a unique voice, such a unique flow. He's got Southern ancestry. We moved to the West, but he grew up idolizing East Coast rappers. So, just like Tupac, I feel like you get the best of both worlds from Snoop, as a rapper. And it's funny when you listen to the Shiznit too. It was very inspirational. If you listen to Ready to Die from Biggie, the intro actually, when he's robbing the train, they're actually playing the Shiznit in the background. So it's just funny there, because you always think there's the East Coast, West Coast beef at the time, but people love this album on the East Coast. I mean, this got massive airplay, when this came out in 94. They were playing this, even the next track, Lodi Dodi. Lodi Dodi got massive airplay in New York, for whatever the reason. And, for Dogfather, it's the total opposite. The Dogfather got no airplay at all, unless it was Angie Martinez just trying to, help Snoop out as a favor from doing the interview. But, the Doggystyle was huge in New York. I remember one time I got on a train. I was on my way to a Knick game, and I actually heard, just the what's my name in the dude's headphones, transferring over to the next track. I was like, man, Doggystyle is just, everybody's playing this shit. It's crazy. So yeah, Lodi Dodi. When this came out, I had no idea who Slick Rick was. So he actually says before the track, he's like, I want to give a shout out to my man Slick Rick. For those who don't like it, eat it, dick. But for those who with me, sing that shit. So at the time, I had no idea that this was, a Slick Rick, tribute. Slick Rick did Lodi Dodi, back in the day. It's one of his biggest hits. But, I really feel like, this is a totally different beat. This beat has Dre all over it. It's almost like Dre gave this more of a menacing, like scary type of, like eerie type of beat. That doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. But, with this version of Lodi Dodi, I mean, the lyrics are pretty much similar. Snoop, inserted doggy to replace a lot of stuff here in terms of the actual lyrics, the doggy underwear. But I feel like with this track, Snoop really, gave it a lot of charisma. You could see how versatile he was with this track, and you could just tell how much he loved, the original track. So yeah, Lodi Dodi's dope. It's probably one of the weaker tracks on the album, but I guess because Slick Rick was such a legend. Hot 97. They used to play this all the time for some reason back during the spring of '94, even though it wasn't a single. And then we have the original Murder Was the Case. Death After Visualizing Eternity. So this is like the best track on the album as far as storytelling. Like if there's one track where DLC really helped out Snoop to just write something really, really good, that was a great story, great concept with him getting murdered, the devil, selling out and, paying the price, going to jail here, toothbrushes scraping on the floor. It's a great track. How they flipped the sample here is crazy too. I think it was, what was it, Santana that did the original Beef or Murder Was the Case. But, this is another track that, Daz is actually the devil on the track. But, I was always under the impression, maybe this is one of the tracks that Daz did, but there's just no way. Dre has his hands all over this thing, even the remix as well. If you could ask me what's the better track, this or the remix, I've always liked this version better. The remix is a little bit more haunting, a little bit more like a horror show. It's very overproduced with the electronic synth keys, but this was pretty damn cool, man. The first Murder Was the Case. I just think in terms of subject matter, the third verse is awesome, man. No more endo, gin, and juice. 25 with an Izzel, with no with a Gizzo, I know. I love that last verse. The whole track is just, insane. But hey, it wasn't a single until they remixed it for the Murder Was the Case soundtrack. But he actually did perform this at the, MTV Video Music Awards. And after it was over, he was like, I'm innocent because, it's ironic because when the video, when this album came out, he was actually going to be on trial for murder. His bodyguard, acted in self-defense and they actually killed a gang member. And, Snoop is on trial for murder until February of '96, which was a crazy trial. It was right after, it was right after the OJ trial too, when it went to trial. So, you have that going on. Plus, at the Source Awards, they did this whole, death row collage with just everybody on the row, just doing one verse. And they closed it out with Snoop coming out of the casket and doing the Murder Was the Case remix. So that was another, live, the song really worked well whenever Snoop actually performed it live, from what I remember. All right, next up we have Serial Killer featuring the DOC. So DLC lost his voice at this time, but he would still like sprinkle in little, you know, um, sound effects on some of the hooks. You got the Dogg Pound with Daz and Kurupt and RBX. Kurupt just, was a lyrical beast here. Just very, very reminiscent of O-Dog from Menace to Society, as he referenced in Doggy Dogg World. Just had that I don't give a fuck, mentality. Just very aggressive. So he was great here. Snoop had a great verse. Serial Killer is the darkest song on the album, probably. I think Dre actually sampled the same sample that Eazy-E did on I think it was called 8 Ball from the NWA album. Just, they just took that same sample and just used it too for Serial Killer. If you listen to some of the tracks that were cut from Doggystyle, a lot of them sound very similar to Serial Killer with just the basic, drums and the basic, sound of it. RBX had his Mind of Minolta verse, which was definitely memorable. But yeah, Serial Killer is dark. There's multiple references here, multiple samples in terms of like the lyrics. And the one that stood out was Suicide. It's a suicide. So I don't know who's the first one to come up with that. There's some controversy. I remember I played this for one of my friends, and he was a huge fan of, I think it was the Gravediggers. They did a song called 1-800-Suicide from the Tales from the Crypt soundtrack, the actual movie. And when he heard this track, he was like, man, these guys are biting Gravediggers. But, I think there might have been another rapper that did that suicide line first, but you get to hear it here. Then you have Who Am I, What's My Name, which is an incredible track. And then you got For All My NIGGAZ and Bitches featuring Dogg Pound and the Lady of Rage. This track is very reminiscent of the Poetic Justice track from the Dogg Pound. I just feel like, Dre really had his hands all over this track with the drums. Kurupt really steals the show, talking about how Rakim is actually his idol here. And he actually says, you can't see me here. So he says, your Kurupt is the one that says, you can't see me multiple times on this album. You don't get a lot of Snoop here. It's a very, very dark beat, but it's very juvenile. It's very menacing. It really is. There's just a lot going on here. It's crazy. But to me, like, you got to be in the mood for a track like this. Next up, we have Ain't No Fun of the Homies Can't Have None, featuring Nate Dogg, Warren G, and Kurupt. So Nate Dogg comes in and steals the show. He says this is like one of the first times where someone just started, singing profanity from what I remember. I mean, you've heard people rap profanity, but singing, since you gave me all your pussy and you even licked my balls. I mean, when you play this in front of people, they're going to be like, what the fuck are you listening to? But Nate Dogg was very soulful here. So when he performed this at the Source Awards, it sounded like they gave him that B-side beat that Biggie and the Brat rapped over, and he cleaned up the lyrics here, and it sounded so good. It sounded great. But yeah, Kurupt, he's just talking about, not getting caught up with promiscuous women and, not wanting to spend money on hoes. And Snoop does the same thing, that he's not going to fall for the voodoo. But Snoop's verse is just crazy. I mean, you just can't repeat some of the things that he was saying. He's bragging about having a big dick. I mean, everything here you could think of. This is the song you did not want to play in front of your grandmother. You did not want to play this track. But hey, it sounds good though, man. Warren G steals the show for me though. He's like, hey, now inhale, exhale with my flow. 1 for the money, 2 for the bitches. So bitches on my side and bitches on my back. I mean, I just love Warren G's flow, man. I feel bad for Warren G. Why the hell he was not signed to Death Row, I have no idea. I have no idea what the story is. If anyone deserves credit for discovering Snoop, it's got to be Warren G. If without Warren G, there is no Snoop and Dre, reuniting. Warren G's the one that passed, the mixtape over the Dre, and the rest is history. But Warren G made an appearance on the Chronic, on the D's Nut skit, and then he makes an appearance here. And then obviously the Above the Rim soundtrack, that's when he set the world on fire and set the tone for his album. But, he never picked up by Death Row. He actually signed with Def Jam. And it's funny, Warren G, I'm pretty sure he produced this beat. I swear to God he did. So there's a lot of different horns and samples here. If you listen to, the samples, it's tough to even recognize Ain't No Fun in them. But when you listen to This DJ by Warren G, it sounds very similar. That do 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 do. And the rumors are, Suge always says, Daz did the album, and Warren G did some of the beats, but when you listen to Ain't No Fun and compare it to This DJ, it's totally different. You could tell Dre added that extra layer to it, the extra drums. With Ain't No Fun, it's like it ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. It's just Dre took it to another level, especially when you listen to This DJ. So I've heard before that Warren G. This is probably if he did anything from this album, it will probably be Ain't No Fun. But there's multiple samples here, and it's not. Once again, this track sounds so fucking good. The beat sounds so good that not one person could do this by themselves. So Dre gets credit for producing the whole album, but there's a dude that produced Gin and Juice, and Dre kind of flipped it, mixed it, and put his own sprinkle on it. And that dude never got paid apparently, or he never got the credit for it. And it does make sense. Like if the Chronic was so successful that why not just put produced by Dr. Dre on it just for icing on the cake? If you can't put Dre's name on the back of the album, it probably wasn't going to sell as well. Especially with the debut album. So then you got Doggy Dogg World featuring Dogg Pound and the Fabulous Dramatics. Love the video here. The video actually won MTV Best Video of the Year. It's funny, like when I was a kid growing up, I never noticed that Pam Grier was the one sitting next to Dr. Dre. So Jackie Brown didn't come out until 97. But yeah, I love Jackie Brown. But I didn't even know who Pam Grier was at that particular time. I didn't, I wasn't alive when Coffee and Foxy Brown came out. But yeah, Doggy Dogg World definitely pays homage to 70s soul with the dramatics and Rerun. I mean, so many different other things here. And it's funny, I never realized that this is a sample of Summer Madness. You heard Summer Madness in Rocky 1. When he's looking at the turtle, that beat, so many rappers have used, this sample. Pete Rock used it and did a nice sample of it. But Doggy Dogg World, you don't really hear it that well here. But, you could definitely hear the simplicity of Summer Madness here. But it's just a nice, slow-paced, soulful track. This is the track of the album where Snoop just sounds a little bit cocky, a little bit arrogant, almost like he's a pimp. Very reminiscent of Big Pimpin' from the Above the Rim soundtrack. I would put them on the same level. He actually shouts out Coolio here. And, a lot of the album, like probably the thing that really stands out here in terms of subject matter is just, biting his style. At the time, like before he even came out with the album, he just noticed everyone's trying to look like him. Everyone's trying to be him. Everyone's trying to sound like him. And this is before he ever releases an album. And it's true. I remember Scottie Pippen, braided his hair, just like Snoop for a couple weeks. It's hard to find the Scotty game where, he clearly, you could tell he was trying to look like Snoop. And the same thing happened for rappers as well. Maybe even in Menace to Society, the O-Dog character, it looks very reminiscent of Snoop. Like that became, that West Coast look, just the way Snoop had his hair braided. So, Doggy Dogg World. Kurupt, steals the show. If you give me 10 bitches, then I'll fuck all 10. If you see my homie Snoop Dogg sipping juice and gin, that's another line you can't repeat. But he had that line where he said, 1, 2, 3, you can't see me. I'm a G like that. Peekaboo, I'm coming through. 1, 2, 3, you can't see me. So John Cena owes Snoop and Kurupt a check, man. So that's probably why Snoop actually did induct, or Cena actually did induct Snoop into the Hall of Fame. And you could tell Cena was definitely highly influenced by Doggystyle, as everybody was. It wasn't just Cena. And then you have Gz and Husterz, that All right, so this was actually a microphone check, and Dre just said, just freestyle, just freestyle, and we'll see how everything works here. But it was so fucking good that they had to use it as a song. And if you listen to the sample, they're very similar, but you could hear Dre added in a little bit of different sounds as the verses progressed that just made it so fucking good. I've never heard this sample sound so good before. And Snoop actually, gets angry here. Like when he's talking about death row. If you went in the road, fuck you and your hoe. Really dope. It's Snoop Doggy back on the solo trip. Clocking mad grips and don't really give a shit about nothing at all. Just my dogs. Stomping through the fog and I'm still gonna fade it off. With the gangster shit to keep you hanging. How many hoes in 94 would I be banging? Everyone to get the job done. Take some, break some, bad enough, make some. Yeah, I mean, I can't do it justice, man, but, his delivery was better than ever on Gz Husterz. I can't say that Gz Husterz is one of the weaker tracks on here. I can't. I think it's an incredible track. It gives more energy than anything. And this is the track that Tupac was freestyling to, and he was so passionate, so energized that there was a dude next to him that just started hugging him. So that was crazy. And before we get to the last track, so if for the 30th anniversary, they actually do have G's Up, Hoes Down, which actually has that Isaac Hayes Walk On By sample. So they released it at first, but for the second pressing, they couldn't get the sample clearances. So G's Up, Hoes Down is only included on the very first pressings of the album, and the recently released 30th anniversary pressings. It was omitted due to sample clearance issues, but it was later re-released on the 2006 Death Row compilation, 15 Years on Death Row. So yeah, but the funny thing is that the first version I got was the tape. The tape didn't have Gz Husterz on it, and it actually says in the credits that there's a song called The Next Episode, but that never made it onto any of the versions. It was a different Next Episode though. It was a version from '93. It was never released on good quality, but it's totally different from the Next Episode from Chronic 2001. But G's Up, Hoes Down is great. Snoop's flow is great. The sample is great. 1, 2, what should I do? I'm slipping in my khaki. Shoot which one, the blue one. I mean, G's Up, Hoes Down, his flow sounds probably better on this track than any other track from the album. But, a lot of rappers have used the sample. So I don't know why he couldn't, they weren't allowed to keep it. And it was limited because of the sample clearance issues. But God damn it, man. G's Up, Hoes Down. If you want to listen to it now on Apple Music, you can. You don't have to worry about it not being there. But yeah, the funny thing is, so when I had the tape, it wasn't on the tape. And then later on the year, I got the CD for my birthday. And I guess the CD didn't sell that well at my record store. And it was actually on it, and I was like, man, and that's what I was thinking. I was like, all right, maybe it was only on the CD, but to me, if you take G's Up, Hoes Down off the album, it's still a classic album. It's still a great album. I'll tell you what, like if you look at It Was Written, so It Was Written, they added on Silent Murder to the tape, but when you take Silent Murder off of the CD, that's a track where I feel like it lessens the quality of the album. But with G's Up, Hoes Down, not necessarily, even though I think it's a great track. I think Snoop's flow sounds incredible on here. But hey, the bottom line is, and the funny thing is, when you listen to the original skit with Sam Snead and Snoop, getting into the fight about the girl, like, your bitch chose me, and you better recognize, or have it your way. The skit was supposed to set up G's, not Gz Husterz. The skit was supposed to set up G's Up, Hoes Down, not Pump Pump. And even if you listen to it on the 30th anniversary, it's going to set up Pump Up. But originally, it was supposed to set up G's Up, Hoes Down. So that's an interesting side note. But you could argue that it sounds a little bit better transitioning into Pump Pump. So Pump Pump, I don't know a lot about the sample here. I don't even think it's a sample. It's just a great beat. I don't know if Dre did it or someone else did it, but it sounds pretty damn fucking cool. I mean, they used it in Above the Rim multiple times when he was lifting weights and even before some of the games. And it's funny, I actually tried to use this on a tape when my basketball team in high school was about to warm up. This wasn't 94. This was like 99. And for whatever reason, man, it just didn't hit. Like, I could just tell no one was really into it. For some reason, it just didn't hit the way I was anticipating it. You know, maybe the speakers needed to be set differently. I don't know what it was. But yeah, Pump Pump is a great track. It's like, pump, 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 pump. Yeah, one of the first tracks I ever heard. I remember I had a friend, the first time, was listening to Doggystyle on tape, and he let me listen to it, and the track that came up was Pump Pump. You know, the line that Snoop had was, I quit school because of recess, you fucking BG. It's an interesting line. You know, because at the time, everybody hated being in school, and it's like, you know, I'm going to get criticized for quitting school, but yeah, I quit because of recess. But basically, it's an interesting line. The line that takes on a totally different meaning when you really think about it. The line is basically, yeah, I quit school because I don't play around. Like, I don't have time to play around. I need to make money, so that's why I quit school, because of recess, because of people that play around. So it's a funny line. I always thought that was funny. But when we're talking about Pump Pump, Snoop's got two great verses here. Little Malik actually delivers the third verse, Mr. Malik, whoever it is, and it was great. The whole track was great. It's a ton of energy here. It sounds different than everything else on the album. Most of this album just sounds like 70s soul funk. This just sounds like just some up-tempo, you know, just hard-ass, you know, beats right here. And it's funny, I'll tell you a story. You know, I was on a plane with my dad, and he heard the track, and he wanted to listen to it. And the opening line was, you know, let the motion of your body be the key, because we be the motherfucking G-Funk family. See, I play the G in this deadly game. Dog Pound's the game. If it ain't one thing, it's the motherfucking other. Word to my granny and my daddy and my mother. And so my dad, you know, heard it, and he was like, oh, you're saying the F word too many times. So this is an example of just awkward parenting. I don't necessarily know if this is great parenting, and I feel bad because, you know, it put him in a tough spot. You know, you got like a 9-10-year-old kid listening to this. You know, what are you supposed to do? So he goes like this to me. So he's like, you know, you shouldn't really curse like that, because, you know, like, say I go up to Bill Clinton and say, hey, Bill, our president in chief, how the fuck are you? He's like, he's going to look at me like I'm low class. So, you know, it's tough, man. It's tough. Like, from being in the position of a parent and letting your kids listen to this album, it's tough, because a lot of parents had to submit, you know, because it was so popular and it was so good. You know, it's like, how could you not want to listen to this? I remember, like, when we used to go to the record store, when I bought The Chronic, when I bought Doggystyle, this dude with long hair and glasses had to come out and talk to my mom and just say, is it okay for your son to buy this album with parental advisory, explicit lyrics on it? And, you know, looking back on it, you know, I don't know what the right call is. The parents were in a really tough predicament, you know, back in the late 90s. I'll definitely say that, but I'll just end it right there. So before we wrap up the album, you know, I think it's a classic. I think it's probably, if you want to be entertained, to me, this is the most entertaining, you know, rap album ever. Is it the best? I'm not going to say it's the best. I'm not even going to say it's the best Death Row album. I prefer The Chronic over this. If you're going to ask me, is this better than Illmatic? I would say no. Is it better than Ready to Die? I'd probably say no as well. But you can make the argument that if you want to hear a dude in his prime that is just untouchable with, you know, just entertaining, you know, beats, you know, beats that are layered and beats that are orgasmic and will set the world on fire. You know, yeah, Doggy doesn't get any better than Doggystyle. And it's a rare case where, you know, the rapper has never been able to, you know, top Doggystyle. And it's because it was a collaborative effort. You know, when you got a rapper like Snoop that's young and inexperienced, but he's taking guidance from Dre as a beat maker and DOC as a writer, you can't lose. So yeah, I mean, Snoop has never been able to top it. You know, if Dre never left Death Row and, you know, Death Row stayed together and Suge Knight wasn't such a fucking, you know, bitch, you know, maybe Snoop could have topped it, but we'll never know. We'll never know. You know, I think the murder case had a lot to do with, you know, Snoop never being able to top, you know, this album. But hey, man, before we end the review, I'm going to read the Sources review and just follow up on it. So here we go. All right, Snoop had a lot to live up to, and this only got 4 mics in the Source. So Me Against the World got 4 mics. So there are times where if you only give a album 4 mics, over time you could say, all right, it's a classic now. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's tough to just say, all right, this is a full 5. This is a classic. And it's Doggystyle is one of those albums that not necessarily got better with time, because at the time everybody loved it. But I think at the time it was just tough to say. The expectations were so high. There was so much anticipation, for Snoop's debut album that, not everybody, wanted to give it the 5 mic rating, because of either the subject matter or possibly because it sounded maybe a little bit too much like a compilation. But hey, Snoop had a lot to live up to. Without asking him, we all but crowned him king. He was going to be the one, we told ourselves. He was going to be the one to lead us out of the hip-hop wasteland. We placed a heavy weight upon his narrow shoulders, and not wanting to disrespect us, he accepted it. And it is true. Snoop, at the time, like, he was cool with just, taking a back seat and being the Robin, the Batman's Dre, and working off the Chronic. Like, he was cool with it. When he felt a little bit of pressure to put out the solo album, he even said, oh shit, man, this is a lot of pressure. And especially with Dogfather, like, maybe he just didn't handle that pressure well. Quite a lot of pressure for a new artist, quite a lot of pressure for a rookie album, but it's not his fault that the album took so long to come out. And it was us, not him, who demanded that Doggystyle embody and surpass the best elements of Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim, Straight Outta Compton by NWA, A Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick by Slick Rick, Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted, Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory, Dr. Dre's The Chronic, 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul, and Raising Hell by Run DMC. I was going to say Beastie Boys, but that's Run DMC. Last year, we underestimated Dre, and he surprised us. This year, we were at the plate, and we were looking for a changeup. We knew about Snoop's vast rap potential. We knew what Dre's music would possibly sound like, and we also knew that it would be harder to impress us this time around. Doggystyle is only half the album we were expecting. The other half, the stuff that would have blown us away a year ago, now seems average by 1994 standards. Thankfully, the album's problems do not involve Snoop. Even with all the drama surrounding his personal life, he emerges into an MC who lives up to all of his advanced hype, whether he's softly crooning his lyrics or throwing them down your throat NYC style. He still comes off as one of the best in the business. On tracks like Gz Husterz and the Shiznit, he lets you know that nothing has changed regarding his game. To tell you the truth, I swoop in the coop. I used to sell loop. I used to shoot hoops, but now to make hits every single day with the homie, the Diggy Dr. Dre. So lay back in the cup, motherfucker, because you get shot. It's 187 on an undercover cop. Yep, the flow is still tight. Could the problem be the music? No, not really. Dre's brand of G-Funk may be common now, but it's still painstakingly well produced. True, you get a little mad when he just replays an entire P-Funk riff or goes over the top with the synth wailing. But overall, the music is great. Great to ride to, even though he cuts the tracks as soon as the lyrics finish. You wish he would have upped the ante like he did on the unreleased original version of NIGGAZ, Don't Give a Fuck, or kept things at the musical level of Gz Husterz, Gin and Juice, and It Ain't No Fun. When you really look at it, the major flaws in this album lie in the extra baggage it seems to carry. You see, I was waiting for a Snoop solo album. What I got was a Death Row compilation with some guest appearances by Snoop. Don't get me wrong, I love Daz and Kurupt, Rage, Nate Dogg, Warren G, RBX, and Little Malik to death. But I don't need them cock blocking my quality time with Snoop on every other track. It was cool having all those heads on Dre's record because it showcased his skills as a part-time rapper and a full-time producer. See, I could see that. See, Dre's more of a producer, so it made sense for a Dre album. I think that's probably one of the biggest flaws. Like, you would just expect more Snoop solo stuff. There are tracks here where Snoop barely even raps. So yeah, I could see that as being a little bit disappointing. At the time, especially. But when you wait this long for a solo album is what you would expect. You don't want skits that aren't as good as the last year's. I'll tell you, the skits on The Chronic are incredible. That $20 Pyramid I love that skit. But I think these skits aren't bad. I think they're pretty good too. The Domino skit is that might be the worst of the album, but yeah, the skits are still pretty good for the most part. You don't want skits that aren't as good as last year's. You don't want a lot of previews of the next album. When you got the insert, they actually promoted some of these albums that never came out, including I think the Helter Skelter with Ice Cube. You don't want endless number of posse cuts where Snoop barely kicks a verse, and you definitely don't want to wait until the third track to hear the man rhyme. Yeah, you didn't get to hear him until Gin and Juice. And the shocker of all shockers, no cut with Dre. It's funny, Dre made an appearance on What's My Name. It was only just one line. Yeah, peep out the gangster shit, and here we throw down. I mean, Dre only had one line. That was really it. Did not even a verse. So I always did think that was funny. I fucked up that. For as short as it is, I actually fucked up the rhyme. It's a must we drop gangster shit. What's the motherfucking name? That was it. None of the magical chemistry and teamwork that made The Chronic such a success. Perhaps next episode will show up as a B-side or something. All right, so yeah, I mean, the next episode was the only track Dre was on. I mean, it's actually on the track listing, but it never made it to any of the pressings. That's what I was saying there. Other than that, you can't complain. You get what you need. From the elegant G's up, hose down. I guess this dude actually got the G's up, hose down on his version of it, so that's cool. To the incredibly funky, ain't no fun. If this is the flavor of Warren G's upcoming LP, put me on the waiting list now. See, yeah, definitely. That definitely felt like a Warren G track. And if Murder Was the Case is a stroke of near genius, then Lodi Dodi is an example of total genius. And the spooky Gin and Juice, nothing short of quintessential Snoop performance. All in all, the positives outweigh the negatives. And while I'm sure that they did the best they could, it must be remembered that it took Dre over 2 years to fine-tune his album. Snoop had less time. Why would it take Dre 2 years? Did not take Dre 2 years. All right, so he left NWA in September of 91. The Chronic was released in December of 92. So it's not exactly 2 years. Maybe it's a year and some change, but hey. Snoop had less time. They had to rush it out before Thanksgiving finished or not. All right, so this is backstory here that, they threatened to cancel all the pre-orders of the album. The album got like a massive amount of pre-orders, and it was supposed to be canceled because, the album almost didn't get finished, but then they rushed it out right before Thanksgiving. So we can only wonder what the outcome would have been if he had the time and peace of mind to refine Doggystyle into the classic it was meant to be. Hopefully, they'll get the chance to do it all over again. Well, they never came close. I hate to say it. But it's funny, man. It's funny. They're like, this is not a classic. This is not the classic they were envisioning. Sometimes it's hard to appreciate greatness when it hits you. It really is. Production only by Dr. Dre. That's once again, that's one of the more controversial things of the album is that Dre is the only one that got credit, even though, a lot of people probably should get credit for this as well. But hey, man, you heard the review there. But like I said, over time, Death Row was definitely a family. But, Death Row didn't really cash in on the solo acts the way they could have done. The original plan was just for everybody to release, a solo album from RBX to Rage. Dogg Pound got to release their thing. But hey, man, the last thing I want to leave you with is Daz. Suge Knight says, Daz did the album. He did the album. And Daz feels like he didn't get the credit he deserves, for this album. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing Daz did after Dre left sounded this good. And he had his chance. Daz had his chance with his solo album that came out, during Easter of 1998. Revenge, Retaliation, and Get Back. It was a dope album. It was good. But does it sound like this? No, it doesn't. So Daz, you had your chance. You just, there's nothing Death Row did sounded this good after Dre left. So, and Snoop, when Snoop went through the samples, like he paid Dre credit. Like every time he deserved to pay him credit. He said, Dre came in and said, put that in there and stop at that. And we need that for the bridge. So, if you're going to go by anybody, you're going to go by Snoop. If Snoop endorses what Dre did on this album, I think it speaks for itself. So I'll end it right there. Doggystyle, 30 years, and I'm out.